There are universal principles that, on one hand, when we don't recognize them, and so therefore we fail to apply them, they can literally limit us. They can literally hinder blessings and promotions that God would desire. But conversely, once we do recognize them and we begin to gain mastery through the process of application, then they bring that promotion, they bring acceleration, and over time, they bring blessings beyond what we ever thought possible. Proverbs tells us that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Now, for so long, that was misunderstood. It kind of created the idea that, well, that's a great idea, and if I was ultra wealthy and could leave this massive amount of financial wealth that would reach down through generations, that would be amazing. But I'm not in that position. And how many times I've heard people say that to me? But again, that expresses that misunderstanding of what the proverb is trying to teach us. See, that word inheritance, a good man leaves an inheritance. That word inheritance literally means the ability to possess. That the important thing is not what we give them, but literally teaching them and training them in the ability to possess. The ability to possess what God has for them. The ability to possess then what we add to that. And it's literally the very same concept of when God brought His people into the promised land. He had, again, promised it to them. He went before them. He had promised them victories. He promised them success. But then the responsibility to possess it, or literally to seize it, fell to them. See, the ability to possess is what will cause those generations to succeed. And once they have that ability to possess, then anything we can add to it, whether it is a degree of financial wealth, assets, anything we are able to add to it, only facilitates and accelerates their success. But without that ability to possess, we literally set them up for failure. And God is calling each of us to grow from being just children to being heirs. And I've shared before. See, in the world system, they work very similar, but there's one clear distinction between God's system and the world system. See, in the world system, to receive that inheritance literally just is a requirement of hitting some benchmark. And the vast majority of the time, that benchmark is merely just hitting a certain age. There is almost never any requirement to demonstrate the ability to successfully manage what's been given to them. And we've all heard the stories of the messes that can come out of that. But God doesn't work that way. God never gives us what we are not prepared to handle. And as we discuss so often, faithfulness is a foundational requirement for promotion in God's paradigm. But how do we know we have the ability to possess? How do we evaluate? And for ourselves, how do we evaluate how we're doing? How can we look at this in a way that, because we all believe we have the ability to possess. How often do you hear someone who literally believes that if they had some sudden windfall like a lottery, that how they would successfully manage it? But the reality is, almost exclusively when it happens, within a few years, it's an utter disaster. It literally ruins people's lives. So how do we evaluate for ourselves how we're progressing in that ability to possess? And just as importantly, for those we desire to bless, whether it's our literal children or it's our spiritual children, whether it's those we're mentoring, whether it's those that we desire to promote, how can we evaluate in any circumstance their ability to possess? So I'm going to give you two benchmarks that I think successfully demonstrate or grade how someone's doing it. And the first benchmark, the first litmus test to pass is growth. Now, we talk often about the parable of the talents, that mandate to grow. But the reality is everything that God gives us has got a requirement for growth. Now, at the same time, though, God allows us to enjoy a portion of it. But a real demonstration of both maturity and the ability to possess is the ability to balance out and focus the effort on growth as opposed to our enjoyment. How much are our decisions focused primarily on the growth and the management of whatever it may be? And for the argument's sake, we'll say financial wealth, that the primary focus is on the growth of it rather than our enjoyment of it. And a great way to look at that is, conversely, how often you hear someone say, well, once I do this, then I will grow it, then I will save it, then I will whatever. And they allow those short-term desires to drive the decision making, whether it's a vacation, a holiday, a car, a home, whatever it may be. And none of those are bad things, but it's about the priorities. Because see, conversely, once you have that maturity and that ability to possess, and you've built the growth into the equation, then out of a portion of the growth, all of these things are literally added to you. So the first benchmark that has to be passed both for ourselves and for those we desire to bless is, where's the focus? Is it primarily on our enjoyment, our fulfillment, or is it on that responsible and not reckless growth of the asset in whatever form it may be? So growth is the first mandate, but the second is overflow. That overflow, remember, our genuine generosity purifies our motives. It demonstrates our confidence that everything we have really truly comes from the Lord. It purifies our motives and it reflects God's character. And we cannot be covetous and genuinely generous at the same time. So the second part of the evaluation in my mind is how much of that growth is then overflowing to bless others in a responsible way. The New Testament tells us that we would have an abundance for every good work. That the focus becomes outward rather than inward. And in both standards to pass, that focus is maturity, and again, outward rather than inward, just strictly at our desires, which doesn't suggest we don't get to enjoy a piece of it. But the reality is when our priorities are right, then we enjoy that excess and there's no burden to it. And because we have then continually demonstrated that ability to possess, we've demonstrated the faithfulness, as in the parable of the talents, we've demonstrated that mandate to grow. God then accelerates all that we do. That we're demonstrating our faithful ability to possess all that He adds to us. And while we are talking at the moment about financial wealth, because again, on one hand, if we're not faithful with money, the Bible tells us who will entrust us with true wealth. That in some ways, financial wealth is a test. And the desire is not that, it's not a test to see if we'll fail. God's desire is that we would pass so He can bless even more. And the more that focus is outward on growth and overflow to others, the more we get to enjoy just a piece of it. And as always, it's all that so that through us, God can demonstrate His amazing love to the world around us so that it would overflow and impact others. That God desires to raise up those heirs who would stand out from the crowd. That they would literally be distinct and God would draw others to them. But it comes through that process of us recognizing the need to possess what God puts into our life. Whether, again, it's financial wealth, gifts, abilities, and so on. And the more we demonstrate the ability to possess, the more God brings promotion, acceleration, and blessing into our lives.